Alright, tonight we're going to take a look at Unit 6, Lesson B, the quadratic formula. Tonight, your objective is to be able to solve a quadratic equation by using the quadratic formula. Remember before, our quadratic equation is always set up ax squared plus bx plus c. And remember, our a, b, and c are all real numbers. So what we have is our quadratic formula that we can actually use to find our solutions for x. This will actually work for every single problem, every single quadratic that you see, but we are going to use it when maybe we can't factor or when the square root method isn't first. So we're going to take the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a, where what we're going to do is we're going to take each of those values for a, b, and c and plug them into this formula. The first example we're going to take a look at, though, is just identifying our a, b, and c values for the quadratic, because this is going to be important to do when we're actually working with the formula. So if we take a look at letter A, I have 7x squared minus 3x minus 1. So I need my a, b, and c value. Now remember, your a always comes in front of that x squared term, so a is going to be 7. Our b comes in front of our x term, so we have a negative 3, and my c is my constant. Remember to include that sign in front. Now if I take a look at my second example, I have negative 2x squared plus 9x equals 0. So I have my a term, which is negative 2, and my b, which is 9, but here I don't have a constant listed, so my c value is going to be 0. Then finally, letter C, what you notice here is we are not listed in descending order. We always want to be in that ax squared plus bx plus c. So the first thing I'm going to do is a little bit of rearranging. So I have 5x squared minus 2x plus 3 equals 0. So now I can go through and list out a, b, and c. So my a is going to be 5, b is going to be negative 2, and c is going to be a positive 3. So like I said, for this first example, the only thing that we're doing here is just identifying that a, b, and c. Now if we look down at example 2, we are actually going to use our quadratic formula to solve. So just a reminder, so we don't have to scroll back up to the top, we are going to take the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a. So I think what would be really helpful to start these problems is if we do exactly what we did in example 1. List out your a, b, and c values. So a is going to be 1, b is going to be negative 5, and c is going to be negative 14. So now wherever I see an a, I'm going to plug that back into my formula. For this first part, when it says a negative b, we always want to take the opposite of what it is. So right now we have a negative 5, so we're actually going to start with a positive 5 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so we're going to take negative 5 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 14, all divided by 2 times 1. So now if I simplify it underneath the radical first, I have 5 plus or minus 5. Negative 5 squared gives me a positive 25. Then I have negative 4 times 1 is a negative 4 times a negative 14 is going to be a positive 56, all divided by 2. So now I have 5 plus or minus the square root. I'm going to combine these two here, and I get 81, all divided by 2. So now I want to take the square root of 81, which is 9. So I have 5 plus or minus 9 over 2. But now, since we have that plus or minus, we got to split these into two separate solutions. So the first one's going to be 5 plus 9 divided by 2. The second one's going to be 5 minus 9 divided by 2. So 5 plus 9 is 14, divided by 2 is 7. So one solution is x equals 7. And then the other I have 5 minus 9, which is a negative 4, divided by 2 gives me a negative 2. So these are my two solutions for x in this first problem. Now, if I take a look at letter B, I'm going to list out my A, B, and C values again. A is going to be equal to 4. B is going to be negative 1. And C is going to be negative 18. So if I plug this back in to my quadratic formula, I take the opposite of B. So right now, if it's negative, we want to work with a positive 1 plus or minus the square root of negative 1 squared minus 4 times 4, because that's my A value, times a negative 18, all divided by 2 times A, which is 4. So now if I simplify underneath the radical first, I have negative 1 squared is 1. So this is just a 1. I have negative 4 times 4 is a negative 16 times a negative 18 gives me a positive 288. So now 1 plus 288 gives me a 289, all divided by 2 times 4, which is 8. So now 289 is a perfect square, so if I take the square root, I get 1 plus or minus 17 over 8. So remember, we do have to split these into those two separate solutions. So I have 1 plus 17 divided by 8 and 1 minus 17 divided by 8. So 1 plus 17 is 18 divided by 8 gives me 2.25. And then the bottom one, 1 minus 17, is a negative 16 divided by 2 is a negative 2. So my solutions here are x equals 2.25 and x equals negative 2. So these are my two solutions for the second part for B. Now if I look at letter C, my A is equal to negative 1, my B is equal to 2, and my C is equal to negative 4. So I'm going to do the same thing again. Now if I look here, my B is positive, so to take the opposite, I'm going to start with a negative 2 plus or minus B squared, so I'm going to take 2 squared minus 4 times negative 1 times negative 4, all divided by 2 times negative 1. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to simplify underneath my square root first, so I have negative 2 plus or minus 2 squared is 4. Then I have a negative 4 times negative 1 is a positive 4, times a negative 4 is a negative 16, all over 2 times negative 1. Now, if I simplify again underneath my radical, I have negative 2 plus or minus 4 minus 16 gives me a negative 12, all over a negative 2. What you guys should be looking at here is my next step is to simplify that radical. I can never take the square root of a negative number. So right here we can stop here. We can't go any further because we can't get an answer for the square root of negative 12. So here our answer is going to be no real solutions, because we can't take the square root of that negative number. So these U-tries for this section are on the back page here. The next thing we're going to take a look at is a find the error problem. So the first thing that I'm going to do, even though I'm finding the error and correcting, the first thing I want to do is I want to find out what A, B, and C are so that I can check to make sure that their work is correct. So my A is 2, B is negative 5, and C is negative 6. So if I look at my first step to see if they plugged everything in right, they take the opposite of B, which looks good, times B squared minus 4 times A times C, all over 2 times 2. So step 1 checks out. Now if we look at our second step, I have 5 plus or minus the square, or if we take negative 5 and square it, we're not going to get a negative 25. We are going to get a positive 25. So my error here is in step 2. So from here, I am going to finish this problem. So if I simplify here, I'm going to have 5 plus or minus the square root of negative 5 squared should be a positive 25 plus 48 divided by 4. Now, the next thing here, 25 plus 48 is going to give me a 73. So I have 5 plus or minus the square root of 73 over 4. Now, when I take the square root of 73, it isn't a perfect square, so we're going to round our answer to the nearest hundredth. So when we simplify here, we have 5 plus or minus the square root of 73, which works out to be 8.54, all divided by 4. So now remember, we have to split these into those two separate solutions for x. So I'm going to have 5 plus 8.54 over 4 and 5 minus 8.54 over 4. So I have 5 plus 8.54, which gives me 13.54 divided by 4. So x is going to be equal to 3.39. On the bottom here, we have 5 minus 8.54, so this gives me a negative 3.54. We divide that by 4 and we get negative 0.89. So my two solutions here are x equals 3.39 and x equals negative 0.89. So we found our error in step 2, and then we went through and finished the problem. So you guys are going to work on this U try in class tomorrow. The very last thing though is you need to make sure that you go to this last page and fill in this last part for the video. Alright, we'll see you guys tomorrow.